Welcome to the Compassion Arts Festival program, The Absence of Unnecessary Hurting, a reflection on the seventh trust tenet, quote, refrain from harming life in order to learn about it, end quote. That will feature readings of the poetry of Gretchen Primack from her book, Kind, and writings by Mandy Suzanne Wong from her book, Listen, We All Bleed. The program's title references a poem by Gretchen Primack on which the heart of this Seventh Trust program is based. And here's a little bit about Gretchen Primack. Gretchen Primack is a poet, animal advocate, and educator living in New York's Hudson Valley. She's the author of 3 poetry collections, Kind, which explores the dynamic between humans and other animals in our time and place. Visiting Days, which imagines a maximum security men's prison like the ones where she's been a teacher. And Doris's Red Spaces, a more personal collection, along with a chapbook, The Slow Creaking of Planets. Gretchen co-wrote The Lucky Ones, My Passionate Fight for Farm Animals, with Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary co-founder Jenny Brown. Her poems have been published in numerous publications, journals, and anthologies. She has taught and/or administrated with prison education programs since 2006 and is a dedicated advocate for the rights of both human and animal lives. And here's a bit about Mandy Suzanne Wong. Bermudian Mandy Suzanne Wong is an award-winning novelist and essayist and the author of the newly released book, Listen, We All Bleed, an informative, powerful, and haunting essay collection devoted to works about the world of animal voices. Mandy Suzanne is also the author of the essay collection and exhibition catalog, Animals Across Discipline, Time and Space, McMaster, and the award-winning nonfiction chapbook, Artificial Wilderness. She is the author of the debut novel, Drafts of a Suicide Note. Her work appears in numerous publications, and her next book, The Box, will be coming out in 2023. And now let's pass it over to Gretchen.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you and to be reading from Kind and as part of Compassion Arts Festival and thinking a lot about Jane Goodall's Seventh Trust. So I'll start with the poem that titles this program tonight, The Absence of Unnecessary Hurting. But after that, I'm really going to be focusing on new poems. This version of Kind is a reissue by Lantern Books. And doing a reissue means that I got to write 10 new poems, and it also has completely new art. So I will be reading new poems, but let's start with an old one so that we can get into the mood of the Seventh Trust. The Absence of Unnecessary Hurting. This is the press of the earth. One star hanging there, honking like a goose. The lake a smudge of black juice, the hill a draped pancake. Frog singing, sharp and gutty. Night, clean air, clear water, 5 baby mink in a pile, snoring. Overwhelm can be dug from the sludge below dock. On either side, fruits slung over branches glued to their seeds. Here in the slurry live the things that I consider, here in the hills. What do people think of? What do they think of me in my carings? Ripples lunch on each other. Heavenly body lights flicker, too cool for moths. I don't want to hurt things. The fine brown eye of an animal. The broad, slick leaf of a wing. I want to be gentle here. I want to be worthy of you, lovely ground. Bury my face in your tired, broken bread. Because of the timing of this new edition of Kind, I actually was able to include 2 poems about COVID. And I don't know if you remember in those early days where so many people were locked away, and it actually opened the world to non-human animals in a way that wasn't true before. So this is a poem that came out of that notion, and it's called COVID-1. This year, spring and summer decided to go on without us, to roll in the fields while we rolled in our poison. The glory, the relaxed breaths of it. They pressed against each other, spring and summer, not a reed fit between. They made us wait while the birds built and snakes sunned and crocs snapped at their frogs. The air milded and cleared far from our sick beds because of our sick beds. Oh, human, see, you are important. Biology, hubris, apocalypse, cages, carbon, energy. You are important, just not the way you think, just not the way you wish. Here's a poem that Mandy Suzanne requested, and nobody says no to Mandy Suzanne. Nobody wants to say no to Mandy Suzanne because she is an amazing human. So I'm going to read this one. This also was in the original version of Kind, and it's called Ringling. It's a persona poem in the voice of someone who is not me, and I think it will be evident to you if it isn't already from the name Ringling, who is speaking. Mandy Suzanne is going to do some reading of her own on a similar subject once this poem is done. Ringling. Maybe someday you will trick for me. Maybe I will find value in you on one foot. I will take you from family, home, so I can watch you balance. Will you bore me? I bore myself now, reduced to your conditions, cut off from my life and language. None of me is left. Still, you found something to waste.
Thank you so much for including that poem, Gretchen, and for not saying no. That poem just really gets me in so many ways, and it really amazed me when we met over Zoom about how in tune our work really is, even though we produced it entirely independently. So thank you so much for letting me join you here today, and thank you, Ellie and Marlene, for having me. I'm going to read a little bit from my essay collection, Listen, We All Bleed, which has just been published by New Rivers Press. It's about radical artists from around the world whose anti-anthropocentric works use sound, including recordings of non-human animal voices, to plead for an end to violence against non-human animals. And this first excerpt is about an artwork called 30 Times a Minute by Compassion Arts Festival exhibitor Colleen Plum, a sound and video installation that's also a guerrilla video projection work and now a grand and gorgeous book. And I'm going to read to you about the sonic aspects of this project. We're listening to a sound that should have passed us by in a fraction of a second, but it happens that it's stuck, a chord stuck in a trap. We're on uncomfortable benches in a dark room with a big screen, wires slashed the picture all the way through. Behind them is an Asian elephant. Behind the elephant, a thick fence. The elephant, whose name is Sunda, sways from side to side. Cut to an African elephant swaying side to side in another zoo, Cut to an Asian elephant swaying behind bars as thick as her gray legs. Another holds a trunk full of hay, doesn't eat it, just holds it, swaying from side to side. Different elephants, different zoos, all doing the same thing, swaying side to side, side to side. As this sound, this long cord, hunkers down between our ears, going nowhere. Going nowhere. The elephants whom Colleen Plum videoed without permission in almost 70 North American and European zoos weave from left to right. Swaying in place is abnormal for elephants. These majestic migrants would walk 50 miles each day if they were free. We can't know for certain what the swaying is about, not being elephants, but Colleen observes only captive elephants exhibit weaving. It's stereotypic behavior, pathological. If a human rocked from side to side to side all day, every single long, endless day, they'd be diagnosed mentally ill. Colleen says that in elephants, these compulsive, repetitive movements can cause debilitating, life-threatening damage to the animal's feet and joints. So in her installation, 30 times a minute, we watch beautiful gray bodies grinding themselves down. Each elephant is alone, wearing herself out to music that's forgotten how to move. That's what we're hearing. This long sound changes slowly when it changes, sometimes tinkles. It's the sound of old recordings of human animals playing hymns and classical music on non-human, non-animal bodies. But Colleen breaks the music into fragments of sound and slows the fragments down to between 1 and 10% of their original speeds. So what once were melodies and progressions are now just chord. Time for an elephant is slow. A nomadic elephant is also a virtuoso of stillness. Elephants stand perfectly still for what seems like ages, listening. Imagine such a being in a tight enclosure of sand, concrete, and wire, surrounded by a million hard little footsteps pattering, 1,000 cameras clicking, people elbowing and growling as they shove their offspring at the electric fences so they can check ecological connectivity off their parenting to-do list, smartphones pinging, children screeching, samba music from the nearby gift shop, all this constantly. Colleen tries to imagine what the world sounds like to elephants, if she could listen in an elephant's slow time. A photographer by training, Colleen had never worked with sound before. Why not commission someone to create the soundtrack for her installation? Because Colleen wants to retrain her perspective personally, to suffer the unlearning of her humanity, to put herself through the experience of unlearning how to listen like a clothed and squeaky, always rushing primate. Colleen herself takes on the work of unraveling familiar tunes into long piles of sound. It's a new, uncertain ritual for her. The painstaking process of her perception slowing, ceasing to be familiar or make sense, bleeding out her own perspective in the long, impossible anguish of becoming elephant. It's not about translating elephant speech. 30 times a minute is about elephants hearing in captivity. Colleen's slow sounds try to sound out their experience, the feeling of their interminable days, dreaming away the discrepancy between humans' experience of time, elephants' time, and prisoners' time, to expose Colleen's own insides, her delicate hearing organs and suggestible senses, to these caged elephants' monotony. Call it empathy if you like. I think it's more complicated. Colleen's distorted, no longer human sounds are the sounds of Colleen listening to captive elephants' way of listening. Colleen's sounds are listening in action, listening as action and response. Listening, just listening, can itself be a form of activism, but to do so, it must involve deliberating how we listen and deliberately altering the way we listen so that we can appreciate others intently, emotionally, giving them the best of our attention, inviting them to affect us deeply, to alter us from within. Colleen's work sounds out how listening bled her out of herself. Sunda's pachyderm heart beats 30 times a minute, half the speed of yours and mine. In Colleen's work, 30 times a minute, we hear how Sunda feels her time. What is sound but time made flesh? If sound's always passing through, isn't it the touch of time? Colleen's stretched sounds dream of a human body trapped in a captive's time, with elephants' ears. Thank you. Let's hear some more poetry.
Well, that was magnificent. Thank you. And it makes me think about the way that we rationalize, because we rationalize zoos. And you hit the nail on the head. It's like this, check it off our list of, ecological connection and such. We humans can rationalize anything. And we also rationalize the eating of animals in many ways. But one way that we do it is by saying, well, but I wouldn't eat that kind of animal. I just eat the ones that are raised humanely, right? Or that. So here's a couple of poems on that, Humane 1 and Humane 2. These are also persona poems. And you as a listener can imagine for yourself whatever species you would like speaking. I'm not clear on that on purpose. So Humane 1. I know a knife when I see one. I want my throat whole. What could I barter for myself? There is grass here. Still, I want my throat. There is the rope, the winch. I want my life like life does. It isn't yours. Humane 2. To kill me quietly, to kill me swiftly. The strongest bolt gun, the sharpest knife, the cleanest floor is violence. And fear will trap in every cell of myself. I think the thing that I was most excited about when I realized that I had the chance to write new poems for this new edition that Lantern brought out was the chance to write about fish. I didn't write about fish in the original, and I'm really sorry about that and a little ashamed of that. I think too often we forget about fish. And to me, the way that humans conceive of fish is a tremendous irony, because we feel that we are much better and much smarter than fish. Why? Because they look very different from us and they act very different from us. Well, they live in a different environment. Of course, they look different from us. They're not going to be hairy and cuddly if they live full-time underwater, right? So here we have a situation where our own limitations are what make us see them as limited. Here's a poem called Because You Are Silver. And when it's done, we get to hear once again from Mandy Suzanne. Because you are silver, because of your round eye and where it sits, because of your water home, your air distrust, because fins are frilled paper, not hands, because of your temperature, I can take your body, hook you up in a flail, net you up with thousands of others, and no person will sigh for your life. The body made for its home, just as any body is. Its flashing silver, its cool fins, and perfect eyes. Because our vaunted minds are too small to understand other minds, we will call you mindless and swallow you. Let me look that face in the eye and tell you, fish, I could no sooner eat your flesh than my own.
Thanks, Gretchen. I love that poem so much. I actually requested that one too, because so few artists address fishes. And I just love that that poem addresses a single fish as an individual, as a subject that can be addressed and who can appreciate being addressed. In other words, someone with a mind. I'm going to read a small excerpt about my experience of listening to an album of hydrophone recordings called Energy Field. It's by the artist Jana Vinderen, a Norwegian marine biologist who's now an artist. Crickle crackle, scintillating sonic sparkles in an expanse thrown open above. A glacier's slow dance like distant thunder. A little water gurgling, a lot of water falling. I hear gulping, slurping, creaking, crack, glissando of clicks, a cry, maybe a whistle, far away and close. The liner notes say crustaceans and fishes, such as cod, haddock, herring, and pollock. Perhaps you didn't know that fishes serenade. I had no idea what compressed oxygen inside 10,000-year-old ice sounds like. Vinderen says, what I decided I really wanted to do was seek out the sounds that we do not notice or cannot perceive. So it's from Vinderen that I learned sea snails are noisy eaters. I learned the voice of the toadfish. I'm mesmerized by dolphins, echolocation clicks, and that toadfish using his cave as an amplifier. Vinderen records in all this planet's oceans. She recycles her toad and codfishy recordings in multiple artworks because she loves these sounds. To love a sound, care that it happens, that it continue happening somewhere, although we cannot reach it. Listening to fishes chit-chat, I listen like a foreigner. That's all Vinderen asks, that we listen and wonder, care that foreigners live beyond our notice. It's important to realize that things we'll never meet, so different from ourselves that we'll never understand them, are nonetheless alive, because even though they're distant, we coincide with them. We live together with fishes in this now, here on this watery stone swimming through space. It's easy to forget. Because we're primates, we must make a special effort to meet water denizens. One way or another, it requires leaving home. If I snorkeled to a reef and found a star coral, I'd never see it move. Coral time may be my time. We may be intimate in space, but its pace is not my pace, which means its time is also not my time. It lives on a different scale, too slow for us to measure. Besides, seeing things isn't enough to make humans care for them, especially ocean life. Consider the codfish, catfish, tuna fish. To flap around in agony and terror with a hook in your mouth, vomiting blood while everybody cheers is awful. Yet many people enjoy making it happen to others or watching it happen on TV. Sometimes even activists who agonize over elephants can't bring themselves to feel or fight for fishes. Why? Because fishes don't have eyelids. It's true, space aliens are often depicted without eyelids. Without eyelids, fishes seem distant, beyond the outer orbit of our circle of moral concern. The biologist Jonathan Balcombs wrote that fishes' unblinking eyes, constantly bathed in water and thus in no need of lids, amplify the illusion that they feel nothing. With a deficit of stimuli that normally trigger our sympathy, we are thus numbed to the fish's plight. Even when we see a fish thrashing on a boat, many humans see not excruciating pain and suffering terror, but mechanical reflex, like a ceiling fan keeps turning for a while after you turn it off. But when a thing lifts its voice, claps its hands, or pounds the table, we know it for a living thing. It isn't that fishes don't scream, Balcom says. Many fishes do vocalize when they are hurt, but the sounds they produce evolve to pass through water, and as we're unequipped to live in water, rarely do we detect them. Jana Vinderen wants to change this, make us feel that fishes feel. Sound is a very physical medium, she says. It can come in very close. It brings you right there, right here in Energy Field. We're steeped in alien life. Listen as it burbles into your head from mouths and claws and sheets of ice. We're not used to fishes who aren't already corpses or going insane in aquariums. We're not used to oceanic living. That's what Vinderen wants to preserve, the joy she discovers with her hydrophones. She says, There is an inherent rhythm in all living, a pulse. If a fish is chewing on something, there is a rhythm. When the sea urchin is filtrating the water, there is a rhythm. It gives me hope to listen to the animals, to listen closely and look closely at how the creatures around us put a perspective on life. We need to pay attention. To love, to pay attention to oceanic life is to resist ideologies that grind it into chum. All the same, although Vinderen makes art for human ears, the animals she records never raised their voices for our sake. What the codfish says isn't for us to understand. The belief that humans can translate everything into terms that we find meaningful, this is consumptive thinking. Aquatic animals have nothing to say to us except that they're here now, alive, and that alone means a relationship exists between us. Real life living a hand's breadth from our sewer drains and beyond the last frontier of our understanding. Oceans are not our empires. Oceans aren't liquid slaughterhouses or oil reserves. Oceans live, but not for us. Art can sound this out, help us learn it with our bodies, make it emotional. When artworks make us feel that non-humans are not us and not for us, those artworks do something very necessary. Vinderen is also listening for human absence in a place that humans need to leave alone. Thank you. Back to you, Gretchen.
Just wow. If you have heard me read before, there's a good chance that you have heard me read my favorite poem from Kyne, which is called Love This, and is about a cow. And because you have probably heard Love This, if you've heard me before, and you very well may have, I thought I would read another one, a new one on the subject called Holstein. Why do I want to write a new poem on that subject, which was already treated? Because this theme, the dairy industry, could never be written about enough. I mentioned that there's new art in the book. There are images, and I wish that you could see this one, but maybe you will if you get the book, by Jane O'Hara, who is a shining light in art in general, and specifically in animal art. You saw the gorgeous cover. That's a piece of art by Dana Ellen, another brilliant shining light in the world of animal art. Here's Holstein. I was also a child, and also had one, and another a year later, and another, and could not touch even one. Had I been born into a kind world, my life would have been mine, not a stranger's, as long as my body wanted life. Had I lived in a kind world, child, this milk would have been yours. No one would have filled your lungs with loss. Put your head where your kind is born to be, but is never allowed, at my flank. The great spill of me. Smell me from your bent neck, child. I'm going to read a poem now that was in the original, but which I've absolutely never read at a reading. I've probably given 100 readings. I've never read this one. It's a little bit longer. That might be part of it. But I really feel that this is a good moment to read this poem. It's called The Hunter, and it's about hunting. And where I live in the Hudson Valley, it's hunting season right now. And earlier today, I was hearing gunshots. Yesterday, I was hearing gunshots. Sometimes I write, and I think sometimes people make art as a way to try to understand something. And I wrote this poem as a way to try to understand what's going through someone's mind when they are hunting. There have been perhaps times and places where that was necessary for survival. It is not a time and a place here and now where it is. So why does someone leave their home and go to someone else's home and kill a family member there and then take that body home to their home. What is that about? And of course, there are different reasons, but here's something that I'm positing. And again, this is slightly longer, so settle in a little bit and just try to figure this out with me. The hunter. He cut trenches through the bluestone, angled scraps littering land, stepping stones to baby pines, welcome mats to mullein. The trenches bear building things to and fro, plans and boards and sump pumps. The trenches bear having been built. The mullein bears them. The scape is not clever, but it is cut and will start its reseeds right now. It will start a thin, patient green. In cross-section, a thin, patient line, crack full of dirt, seeding, and a crack again. He might as well talk to this rock, since he is on it now, and will be under it soon enough. The rock fits a sharp horn of rock under his thigh. Someday he will be a sharp horn under a thigh, he thinks, though he also thinks, world, you are only good now in the ways you are good for me. His body is on the rock. His mind is where minds are, minds that think about where time leaves bodies. He closes his eyes and bays at the sun. Sometimes, not ready for dropped leaves dropped dead, he thinks about the rock he'll be under soon. Soon, because everything is relative. And the rock he will become, if that is where biology and geology merge. Maybe he will become oil. Now the air is blue as a cold day, and all the holes in his head receive it, and he howls at the sun breaking open. But his gunshots are louder than howls. A shooter crying into his animal, your life is mine now, so I have more life. There is only one way out of this world, no matter the trenches, the buckshot. Still, he says, when I take your life, I take on life. Nothing is trying to hurl him or this rock into space, but the leaves have begun to drop, and his skin has its patterns now, its new trace paper feel, and his hair travels in new strange patterns. So there are his gunshots. When I swallow you, I swallow life. He closes his eyes. Maybe he will become rock, maybe oil, a crack of soil, seeding. Mandy Suzanne, would you read to us?
It is tough to find words to follow that poem. And really what really needs to follow the scene in that poem is, and what does follow it is silence. And the only decent segue into what I have to talk about is that that poem really brings home the connection between a human animal and the other animals that he, in this case, he is hunting. I'm going to read about Compassion Arts Festival veteran Catherine Eddy. She also did the cover for my book, Listen, We All Bleed, wonderful collage work. I'm going to read about her 2020 installation, The Urban Wild Coyote Project, which is far from silent. In the Urban Wild Coyote Project, Catherine turns noisy hunting decoys into vocal animal advocates. They begin as game callers, machines that use sound to lure coyotes to their deaths. In 2017, the New York Times reported that near Columbus, Ohio, a sheriff named Dennis Murphy dresses up in full camo and hunts coyotes with a silenced AR-15 assault rifle in settings like strip mall parking lots, housing tract cul-de-sacs, and plazas in the shadow of skyscrapers. The Times had a photo of the sheriff brandishing a double handful of flayed corpses. He gets $100 a hide from the fashion industry. But it's not just about money. Several people told the Times that they enjoy the thrill of urban hunting. And this, amidst hunters' truckloads of plastic deer, terrifying metal contraptions, and dead bodies, is where the game collar comes in. It looks like a cross between a boombox and a spaceship wearing camouflage. You can get it on Amazon. It comes with 75 preloaded sounds, including 3 varieties of coyote distress. Also, coyote pup distress, coyote pup's frenzy, adult cottontail distress, baby cottontail distress, gopher distress, deer fawn distress, cardinal death cry, bird wounded panic, domestic baby pup distress. Sheriff Murphy's favorite sound is squeal of dying rabbit. The soi-disant game collar lures concerned or hungry coyotes into silenced rifle range. Silenced, says the Times, because hunters want to avoid alarming residents, human ones, that is. But really nothing's more alarming than coyote distress 22 seconds. You can hear it on the collar manufacturer's website. The idea, Catherine says, is to use a dying and or distressed animal's voice to trick another animal to respond, and then, having responded, to pay for it with their life. For a hunter to use an animal's language in an attempt to kill them takes anthropocentrism to new heights, Catherine continues. Not to mention recording agonized death throes and selling them to killers for profit. She says, every being that has the capacity for a voice has something to say. Their emotions are embodied by their voice. And it was the exploited animals' voices that inspired her to create the Urban Wild Coyote Project. So what has Catherine done? She's painted this scream machine red, cut pictures from magazines and pasted them all over it. Pictures of disembodied human lips and eyes. She's added bulbous taxidermy eyeballs, stick-on googly eyes with jiggling flat pupils. She's done the same with the remote. Now the game collar looks like the game it really is, ridiculous and deadly. Eyes snipped from fashion magazines are recurring motifs in Catherine's work. It's about blindness, she says. We're so busy ogling specimens of our own species that we're blind to how we treat other animals. It's also about things daring us to meet their gaze, things we want to pretend don't feel our gaze and can't gaze back. A gaze is an interrogating look. A gaze is soundless speaking. From the plastic legs of Catherine's bedazzled game collar, from the handle and self-amplifying loudspeaker, disembodied eyes look right at me. So here I am in Canada at the McMaster Museum of Art in January 2020. The chandeliers, electric candles throw out more shadows than light. From the wall opposite the sofa, floor to ceiling wallpapers hang suspended like sacred scrolls. Pillars jut out of the floor like stalagmites, topped with batwing boomboxes, slithering forth from which are sounds. I find I'm trying to dodge the sounds, making for what seems familiar, the sofa and coffee table on the Turkish rug. A sign invites me to have a seat, pick up the remote on the coffee table, press a button. I do so, and a stalagmite lets out a screech of agony. The stalagmites are pillars with bedazzled game collars on them. On the coffee table are the game collars remotes, as well as 3 smaller game collars that fit in my hand. My hand full of deaths, of moments of mad terror and unbearable pain, final moments of real beings who felt every second of the shock, split of their flesh, the pain, the bafflement. Even an omnivore knows when her blood spurts out of her, it is her own. Whether she's coyote or Canada goose, she understands wanting to live, and so she's terrified, and pain turns terror into panic, and panic erupts from her insides, a scream so horrible no one would have believed her capable of it, least of all she herself. And that moment, that's the moment in my hand, the ghost of that moment, how many times over? The incongruity between the tumult in my ears and the comfort in my limbs as I sink into the sofa in this well-apportioned room makes me look again at where I am. Another look at the chandelier reveals that each of its candelabrums is a spring-loaded steel trap designed to snap the legs of anyone who may be lured into its clutches by the canned screams of others. But hanging from the ceiling and welded together, festooned with electric candles, the traps are no longer dangerous. Thank you.
No, thank you. So I have one more poem for you all tonight. A certain holiday is coming up. I always feel compelled to read this poem when I have a reading at this time of year. It is called Thanksgiving. And I can't thank Ellie, Mandy Suzanne, Compassion Arts, and you who are listening right now enough for this evening. It's been magic for me. If you appreciate Compassion Arts and if you appreciate that melding of activism and art, I hope that you will consider supporting some of the artists that are involved in this festival and are doing that kind of work. We are able to do what we do because people support it. Publishers are willing to take chances on work like ours because people support it. Galleries, record labels, the apparatuses that help artists get their art into the world, they will keep doing that if people support art. We don't have a culture that particularly budgets for or cares about art. But the more we support it, the more it will be out there. And that's a world that I want to live in. So here is Thanksgiving. If she tips her face into rain, she pulls it back down and tucks toward shelter. If she's earned her place, her seeds, the tough bird will take them, snap for them. Her body is not dry or stuffed, not carved, not left over. It courses with systems, one that circulates, sending blood with its sugar and air. One that reproduces, composing shell, cell by cool cell, pushing out a life to wrap in a wing in weather. And one system that shoots current, nerve to nerve, shivers of pleasure in seeds and heat and children, and shivers of alarm when an arm reaches for her body to make her body something carved, something left over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Mandy Suzanne. Beautiful, powerful. And here's a couple questions. Why do you think poetry and the literary arts have the ability to reach people, to reflect on our treatment or mistreatment of animals in ways that just reading or hearing information cannot?
Gretchen, you want to go first?
No, go for it.
Well, the literary arts use the most basic or the most obvious of human languages, which is the written language. And the kind of irony is that people invest print media with a lot of authority. So, you know, when they see something written in, a magazine or newspaper or an academic paper, or these days, even scarily online websites, like a lot of people believe it. What's great about literary arts, like for me being a novelist who also writes essays, is that we can play with the language of authority and subvert it when we're talking about beings who are themselves powerless, in order to show how powerless we ourselves are next to them, and therefore to show that we have no right to presume to exert power over their lives. Like we don't have to, as a novelist, I don't have to cite my sources. I don't have to back myself up with statistics. I don't have to say how old my fishes are, which I would have learned by killing them and taking out the thing that shows you how old they are. I can put myself into that fish's place instead, I can be totally subjective and emotional. I can make up words or make up prose structures that could take you on a journey, make you really feel that you yourself are reading through a fish's life, and that I think has a lot more potential to create empathy, even in like readers who think that they really are educated and really want to read, don't realize a lot of these things that Gretchen and I have been talking about. Even being able to develop the language in such a way that it touches even those people is really valuable, I think, and really fun.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And the fact is, we're all so different, we humans, and so complicated. So it's not clear what is going to reach someone and how someone can be reached. So we have to have as many options out there as possible. So one option is poetry, and one option is novel, and one option is essay, and one option is visual arts, documentary, feature film, keep going. All of those have to be out there so that we can get everyone to understand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mandy, Suzanne, and Gretchen. And how did you come to use your artistry in this way for animals?
I think that for me, the writing and the activism were separate for a long time. And then they eventually, naturally, and sort of organically merged. So I learned the craft of poetry. I read a lot of poetry. I wrote a lot of poetry. In the meantime, I was learning more and more about other species and what kind of relationship I wanted to have with other species. And eventually it felt very natural to put those together.
Well, for me, I came to start thinking about non-human animals when I saw the work of an activist artist, Catherine Eddy, whom I just finished talking about. I heard her work, The Problematic Nature of Flatness, which includes a 14-minute sound recording of a whole variety of farm animals that Catherine went and interviewed in person. She never forced them to participate. She never baited them or lured them, but seeing her with her recorder, they gradually came to understand that she was there to listen to their voices, and they would come up and talk to her. And she put this together in this beautiful collage that she then plays in an empty dining room. So you are sitting in a dining room listening to the voices of your potential prey as they are still alive, but bearing in mind that because they're recorded and live at farms, they are now probably dead. So you are listening to ghosts. And that artwork just changed everything I thought about what art could achieve, what sound art could be, like what I wanted to hear when I was listening to art. And it all went from there. And Catherine is now also one of my dearest friends, and all because of animals and art.
Profound. Thank you. And what is your hope for your work in relation to inspiring change for animals?
I really want to be part of that change in consciousness that Mandy Suzanne just showed us, the power of art to do that. If and when somebody feels that these poems have changed the way that they feel about animals and their relationship to other animals, then my work is done. The fact of the matter is, it has to get out into the world first. So part of my wish is that it is out in the world so that it has the opportunity to do that, to transform. And it's important to me that all different kinds of people hear the poems so that it's not just the preaching of the choir. I love the inspiration and support that the poems give to people who already understand these issues. And I also want them to go outside of that so that they have the ability to, help with transformation.
Yeah, I think that a really important aspect of my work is the idea that being quiet and listening is a form of activism, or can be a form of activism, when you are listening intently to someone who is not shouting, doesn't speak the languages of power, doesn't come from a position that allows them to be heard by a lot of people. And that includes fishes, insects, farm animals, zoo animals, animals we've never heard of, and for me, like if my work can inspire someone to just listen a little more to who else is out there and listen for voices that don't sound like your own, then that would be really great.
Thank you, Mandy, Suzanne, and thank you, Gretchen. And thank you all for joining us at Compassion Arts Festival 2021.